Professional Development Workshop. My name is Lachlan Kalish. I'm from the Division of Learning and Teaching, and I'm joined this morning by several other members of our professional staff community that work in this space. We have Di Plunkett, also from DLT, and Alex Barnes Keegan. Keegan? Pick me up if I'm wrong. Keegan, thank you so much, Alex.
Thanks.
And we are running the Preparing for the Upcoming Teaching Session workshop, which periodically we run. That's going to take people across a whole raft of items to check and be across, predominantly in our online environments. It is being recorded. All of the assets from today, etc., will be provided after the session. But for those of you wanting to play along at home, I'm going to drop the Padlet deck itself that I present from into the chat. Says me. No, not going to work for me. Well, maybe one of my colleagues could do so if they've got hold of the deck. Otherwise, I'll try it again in just a moment. It's in downloads. Let's give that a crack. Anyhow, let's get into it. The session today actually is going to look at a whole range of different tools and processes and workflows. I realise this is probably a little bit small. We're going to look at things like the subject delivery guide, subject outline tool, the relationship between your masters and session sites, and things to look out for now that they've been provisioned. We are in week minus, I'm going to say 2. Yep. -2, which means that some exciting things have happened in your subject sites this week. Namely, students can see things, and also the subject outline itself has been published, which means we're able to finalise the setup in our site. I'm going to be spending most of the session in Brightspace, so I'm just sort of starting with, I guess, covering off the things that we're going to talk about, but we'll be spending most of the session inside the tools themselves. Thank you, Di, so much for sharing the deck for today. We don't stand on formality very much in these sessions. If you have a question, please pop it into the chat. We have 2 experts in this space, and I feel like between them, they're going to be able to cover off a lot of your questions. So drop anything and everything into the chat. I'll be stopping periodically to see if anyone's raging in the chat and needs some assistance. All right, let's get on with things. And I'll get this deck off the screen. That's the board in the background that I'll be following. But let's start inside Brightspace itself. All right, so our lovely Brightspace homepage that everyone would be familiar with by now, I hope. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the Subject Delivery Guide tool. Now that tool itself is provided with a very, very comprehensive list of activities that cover 12 weeks, 14 weeks. There is a lot of activity that's captured inside the Subject Delivery Guide itself. Inside the deck for today, there's actually a link to the Subject Delivery Guide that's provided there. I'll drop that into the chat for you. But this is really background information for you if you're really not sure about the type of activity you should be doing week to week, preparing for the session, during the session, even at the end of session. So let me open it up. And the Subject Delivery Guide itself starts with this little highlighted box here, which actually has a collection of ICS files, calendar files. So if you click on one of these, it's going to download it. And you adding that file or opening that file will actually open in the invites inside Outlook and add those items for each week into your calendar as reminders. So maybe you want that, maybe you don't, but just so you know, that's what's going to happen if you start clicking on those items. In terms of what's actually in them, if we scroll down a little bit, you're going to find that it breaks it down into what's happening before session, and you can see it goes all the way back to week -10, for example. And you'll find it's got the session dates for this year, if you need to know what those are for those weeks, up until week -2, which is where we are at the moment. So if I was to click on this one, now we get into the nitty-gritty. And you'll find that it's talking about things like welcome messages, setting up of assessments. There are links to the help guides, etc., that DLT and DIT provide in this space. and also talking about the review of your grade books, etc. We're going to walk through that stuff today, but I just wanted to say if you're looking for a one-stop shop of items for you to check in this space, the subject delivery guide is probably not a bad place to look. I think as I have some issues, as Tegan's mentioned in the chat, for example, with invites and stuff. I don't necessarily want all those things added to my calendar. It's already pretty crazy. So I usually use the page as a bit of a reference or a source for me to look at the things that are captured in these lists. But that functionality is there for those that are looking for it. All right, so the subject delivery guide gives you a place to refer to if you're looking for a comprehensive list of preparation activities, whether or not you need them or not, really. They're all going to be there. All right, moving right along. I want to talk about, in Brightspace itself, the subject outlines. I'm assuming all of you, particularly conveners, etc., have been working within the subject outlines tool, which we can access in Brightspace itself directly up the top here from the nav. So that's where our QA happens, and that will give you access to all of the subject outlines that you have access to. But inside your subject sites, once they're published, and if we jump into one here, what you'll find, and I have a student view on at the moment, is that inside the nav for the subject, underneath my subject, you'll find a link to subject outlines at the top. Clicking on that, and as long as the outline has been published, which in theory happened yesterday, if all things have gone to plan, you'll find that the students will be able to access the subject outline for their cohort. I'm slightly different as a student. I seem to have access to many cohorts, so I can see Bathurst Distance and Bathurst Internal here. But as a general rule, students will only see the outline for their cohort or their section, as we call it in Brightspace. So the outlines themselves, as long as they're published, will be visible now and available to students to download, along with the assessment information, obviously, that we can now use to finalise the setup of our grade books in Brightspace. So the outline gives me a decent segue to be able to talk about now what's happening because this has been published to your grade book in Brightspace. Let's join the two of those things up. So this subject, for example, has 2 assessments, and we just saw that it has 2 cohorts. So what I'm expecting to see, because the outline's been published, is that if I go into the gradebook, and let's jump out of my student view and go into my grades. The more students you have, the slower your gradebook's going to be to load, and the more marking you've done for all of those students, the slower the gradebook's going to be to load. So if you've got, it feels like a hamster turning the wheel for your site to load, that's what's going on. It reflects how much work is actually going on. All right, I'm going to jump straight into Manage Grades because it's a far better top-down view of what's happening inside your gradebook. And now what we can see here is all of these automatically generated columns which have come from the subject outline. So I can see Bathurst Distance, there's an assessment. I don't know what number it is, but that's what it's the name of the assessment. There's one here for each of the cohorts. 2 assessments times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, there are lots of cohorts and lots of tasks all happening in here. So there's going to be a lot of work for this academic to clean up this gradebook, essentially, because all of these columns are all just automatically created, whether they use them or not. And you can see here, looking down at the final calculated grade amount, it's saying 600, and really we need this number to be saying 100 as a general rule. There are exceptions to that, but really, for most subjects, you want to be tidying this up so that it's only saying 100. Right, I can see a question from Diane. Only have the topics I'm teaching. Diane, what do you mean by topics? Sorry. You're muted, sorry.
Yeah, yep. Sorry, I was trying to find it.
It's okay.
So in this, on this page,
yep.
You've got like heaps of different, like Bathurst International, Albury, Wodonga, Bathurst Distance. I will only have the topic that I'm teaching.
Right, so the cohort that for your subject, if there's only one cohort for it, like Bathurst distance, that's all you're going to see in there. You're not going to see all those others.
Perfect.
Possibly a bad example on my part, but nursing subjects generally tend to have a billion students in them from lots of different cohorts. So that's why we're seeing all of those. If I was to pick on another one, for example, maybe not another good one, let's have a look in BMS anyway. But yes, you'll only see the cohort that the subject is running for. So in this subject, for example, they have far fewer. So they've got Albury distance, Bathurst internal, and that's it. So there are actually 2 cohorts here, but multiple assessments. And again, they need to be tidied up. Hopefully what you're going to see is a multiple of 100 at least as a starting point, but this is what happens the moment the subject outline gets published. Your gradebook starts to have a whole bunch of items that need tidying up. All right, with that in mind, let me get this team sharing thing out of the way. Let's talk a little bit about gradebooks. I'm going to pick on this subject. We have a midwifery subject, and if I have a look briefly at the subject outline, it's going to tell me 3 assessments. Brilliant. I might just use the snipping tool and grab a shot of those so that I can capture the dates, the weightings, and the task numbers. I usually do this when I'm fixing things, so I can refer to that on another screen. And now if I jump into the gradebook for this subject, I'm ready to tidy this up. So manage grades. Let's have a look. These items have come from the subject outline. You can tell straight away because they start with the cohort before a colon. And up here we have 3 tasks that the academic has actually set up. I'll zoom in a little for those of you that don't like small text. Now, the other thing to look at when we're looking at managed grades is this column, the association column, because this tells me which of these items has been joined to a submission portal for students and which of them hasn't. So down here, these items that I said have come from the subject outline are joined to nothing because they've just been automatically populated. So the academic's not going to be using those with the students. They're just taking up space, and in fact, they're going to mess up the final grade calculation, which will stop you doing your grade transfer at the end of session. So we have to get rid of these. These ones are not being used. So what I'm going to be doing at that point is going up to more actions, which is at the top of managed grades. Go down to delete, and then it will ask me to select which ones I want to get rid of. And you'll note that any columns that have been associated with the submission portal already cannot be selected. I can't choose them even by mistake. Right, so they're protected. So I'm going to get rid of this, this, and this. Hit delete. And now if I scroll to the bottom, I'll see that my final calculated grade is giving me 100. Helpfully, the actual columns in the gradebook are actually labelled according to the task numbers as well, which is going to be good for me, good for the students. I won't be guessing what's what. And the only other thing that I might consider doing at this point is actually changing the order of my columns, because generally people like to see the admin override column closer to the end when we're talking about final grades. Right, so at that point we want to reorder. It's up here under more actions again. We go reorder. And I'm going to put admin override down into the bottom position, which is 5. You can't change the order of your final calculated and adjusted grade. They're a preset. But now admin override is at the end. And the only other common sort of request we get in this space is that people want a text area to be able to put comments or for the marking team to use without students seeing it. So they want a text column. So that's what I'm going to add into this space. Inside manage grades, if we go to new, an item, which is bright space for column. And the type of column I'm going to add here is a text column. Let's call it comments. If you want to call it assessment comments, you can. Keep in mind that Brightspace will set the width of the column based on how much text is here. So the longer you make this, the more real estate it's going to use on the page. So try and keep your column names concise if you can, particularly if you have a lot of assessments. All right, so this is a text column. It's not asking me anything about grading or points because it's just text. The only other consideration we have here is that I don't want students to see this column. It's just for me. which means I'm now going to go across into restrictions and hide this from users. I don't need students to see it. Right, save and close. We now have a comments column down the bottom after admin override, which makes a bit of sense to me. So if there's something that's been put in here, maybe they've been referred for academic misconduct, it could be anything. And if I need to back that up with a little bit more information for others in the school, I can put that into comments. So if we switch back to our enter grades view, which is our big spreadsheet, let me zoom out a little. Remember what I said about the width based on assessment names? See how long these task names are and how big the column is? If it was much shorter, I wouldn't need all that space and I could see all of them at the same time. All right, there's my admin override, there's my comments and final grade. So this is basically ready for me to use for the marking of assessments, and then once they're all in at the end of session to do the transfers. So that's probably about as simple and as easy as you want your gradebook to be. Any questions around gradebook setups, subject outline tool, the relationship between the two, or are we pretty good at that point? See some nods. Excellent. Mohammed, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Good,
So
thank you.
I already set up the assessment with Rubric,
Yep.
and now the subject outline brought the assignment.
Mhm.
So do I need to redo this when I delete one of them to reset up the Rubric again, or how can I select the right one?
Do you want to give me your subject code? We'll look at it quickly.
So it's ENG225.
I suspect what you're going to be doing, so there it is for session 30, is just deleting the new columns that have come from the subject outline tool. They're superfluous. So let's open your gradebook and have a look.
Yeah. So showing now 100 something, 40.
All right, so there's an assignment, for example, for the first one, and I can see it's been associated. So that's what students will be using.
Yeah.
These ones have come from the subject outline.
Yes.
So it looks like you've got another assessment, for example, that you need to be setting up at some point for
the exam, the final
for the exam. So that'll be a quiz when you're ready to set it up.
Yes.
At the very least, you're going to be deleting this one because you've already got one here that you're using that has been associated. So you don't have to do anything with the rubric at this point if you've set it up. It's fine with this portal, but this one you can delete and get rid of. And the quiz, depending on whether you want to create a new column when you create the quiz or you just want to connect it to this one, you're able to do that as well. Has the quiz been created already?
No, that's what would be at the end of the year. Yeah.
Okay, well, when it's created and ready, what you're going to be doing is linking the quiz to this column. So we'll leave that one in place, but I would suggest going in to delete and getting rid of that second portal, the first portal. You don't need it. This one.
Okay, I will do that now. Thank you.
No problem. Di and Alex, have I got any questions going on that need some attention?
Yes, you do. So Kristen has asked about, is it best to wait for the subject outline tool to be released before creating your columns, or whether you can do them in the master? And it's a much of a muchness.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I'm a pragmatist, so obviously I want the least amount of work. I personally love the idea of having my columns set up in a master site ready to go, but decontextualized. So what I mean by that is no due dates and no waitings. You wait until the actual site's pushed out and then and your outline's published before you finish that up. But there's no reason why you can't have assessment portals and columns in the master waiting for you to use them. And then that way, when the outline gets published, you just delete the new columns. I think that's really nice, but some people have really complex assessment setups, and sometimes it doesn't play out like that. So as Di said, it depends what you're comfortable with. I don't see a problem with either one. The big thing to look out for is if you're in a master site, I'm sure I've got one somewhere here that I can jump into, maybe. That'll do. You must make sure, if you've got assessment portals and columns created, that they do not have any due dates in them. This is the big risk with having these set up or copied back from your session subject sites, etc., back into the master. So people obviously need to review at the end of session and copy their either content or assessment if there have been changes back into the master. But if you copy something with a due date in it back into the master site, the next time the subject is provisioned, those due dates will also be provisioned, and the students will instantly, the moment they're enrolled in the site, not when they can see the site, the moment they're enrolled at week -4, they'll all get emails saying you've missed your cutoff dates for your assessments, which is not going to be an amazing first experience for them. So the big risk with having portals and columns, etc., finalized within your master site is just making sure that there is nothing in either the due dates or your start and end dates inside them. You don't want any of that information, which is session specific, to be in a master site ever. So hopefully I've made that point strongly enough. Other questions, Di?
Yep. So we've got, there was one in there that's been removed, but that was talking about if they've got nothing linked. So when they go into gradebook, like you've shown how easy it is to actually determine which ones to delete, but what if none of them are linked?
Mm-hmm.
And then Tegan's also said there's no assignments showing in her gradebook.
Okay. Tegan, can I? Oh, I can see 2:30.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Let's do it. For 26:30. That's what we want. Okay, so at the moment underneath assignments, I can see we have a bunch of assignments created. We have some here that have a different cohort against them. Okay, Sydney, common portals, and then a little message up the top here about Turnitin. Before I get too sidetracked, just if you ever see that message, just hit re-enable. Don't think twice about it, just hit re-enable, get rid of it. That will make sure that Turnitin's working. All right, so we have 6 portals in here, but what I can see, looking at the icons next to the assessment names, is firstly that they're hidden and that Turnitin is available, but nothing else. So they haven't been linked to the gradebook, which means either you wanted to link them to the columns that have come from the subject outline, or you wanted to create your own columns for them. I'm guessing if we have a sneak peek at the gradebook, into manage grades, we have 6 portals waiting for us to use. So there's really no reason for us not to link these. So let's go through that process. And again, remember I was talking about the association column. There's nothing in here. So that confirms none of these have been linked yet. All right, so back to the assessments. Let's link them. And what we do at that point, edit the assessment. At the moment, it's telling me ungraded. So this is why I generally take a snapshot of the subject outline before I do this sort of thing. So let's do that quickly. So I know what the weighting is what I'm getting at. All right, let's do that. Okay, so I've got those over there. 3 tasks, there's the weightings, back to the assessment. And we go edit. First one, A1 is worth 25%. You'll notice that the moment you put weighting in for an assessment task, it instantly changes this setting to in gradebook. And if you hit save or save and close, at this point it will create a column on the spot, a brand new column with this name. We don't want that because you've already got columns waiting for you in the gradebook, right? So we want to link rather than create a new one. So I'm going to hit the drop down here, link to existing. And again, link to existing. And now it will give me a list of all the unassociated columns available in the gradebook. So this was for Albury. And it was the first assessment, which is a research report. There it is. And it's worth 25. You'll notice once you link it, it confirms the point value. So let's hit OK. And then you would come in and put the due date in here as well if you're ready to do that. So from your outline, it's telling me the due date's the 20th of March. So I'd put that in there as well at this point. 20th of March. And then any instructions you need to put in here for the tasks. Even if there's nothing else in here, I normally have something like this. referring students to the subject outline. Even if you have no other information for students in the instruction for an assessment, at the very least point them towards the outline where there's going to be that information. Then you would come in and finish configuring the assessment, whether it's to do with the file types being used or anything else. But at this point, as far as joining it to the columns in the gradebook, that's all you need to do. And if you hit save and close, what you'll find now is that this little ribbon will be here telling us that it is now joined to the gradebook. Right, so you'll need to do that same linking with each of the other portals that are in there. So you've got 5 more to do. And then once they're done, you can go into your gradebook, switch to manage grades, and now you'll see against that first common portal, the Albury distance portal, it's now associated. Okay, this is a really good point actually, because even though your final grade down here, calculated grade, says 200, what Brightspace does by default is it doesn't count scores or submissions, or in our case columns in the gradebook, if there's no score in there. So obviously the students that are getting results for Sydney are not going to get scores for tasks for common portals. So it's only going to include the 100 points, assuming they've done all 3 tasks, from these columns. So even though this says 200, you don't need to worry about it at this point, because it's actually going to exclude any columns that they don't get results for. All right, so that's as long as you link those portals, as we looked at before, you're okay.
Cool, thank you.
My pleasure. Di, any other questions, or are we good at that point?
No, we're all good. Thanks, Lockie.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so let's keep going. All right, I'm going to just talk to you very briefly about moving content around between sites, because at this point in time, people are usually transferring a bunch of stuff, either to a master, from another session site. So you need to be across how to do that process properly and things to look out for. So what I'm going to do here is jump into just a site that's not going to take much worrying about. So that'll do. So this is a training site. Let's assume that I need to get some content in here from somewhere else. So with this process, you always start in the destination. And at that point, I'm going to go into my subject admin area and open up import, export, copy components up here. And the only function I want you to think about using in this space is this top one. Copy components from another org unit, which just means copy stuff from another Brightspace site. That's what we want. Don't mess around with exporting and importing packages and components, etc. If you need help along those lines and you're really interested in it, perhaps log a job and speak to someone in DLT or DIT to help you with that process. But I would advise you to steer clear of those. What we're looking for here is this first option, copy components, and I'm going to search for the source. Where's this information coming from? And at that point, you simply put the name of the subject that you want to draw it from here. So for example, if we were just looking at MKT, whatever that was called, 1, 2, 3, no. Let's try 100, no dice. What was that subject code, Tegan?
230.
Thank you, I was close. All right, so 230, and it'll give you a full list of subjects with that name that you have access to. So there is the 30 site. If I wanted to grab something from there, I can select it from the list, add selected. Now, here's the first big warning. Never click the big blue button down the bottom here that says copy all components, because what's that's going to do is bring all of the baggage from that other site across and create a huge mess for you to tidy up. There is so much in a Brightspace site. You don't want it all. You want fairly specific things. So never click the big blue button there, copy all components. Go to select components, and this will give you a list of the type of things, if you had to click that button, that it would bring across. Calendars, content, which is usually what people are looking for, at which point you could go into your content area. Do you want all the content? Do you want particular parts of the content? You can then continue, and it will give you a list of all those folders. Do you want everything that's in the folder, or do you want specific items from the folder? So if I turned around and said, oh, I want something in here, and again, I can select all of it, or I can drill down and just get a single page, right? So this is quite, it allows you to be quite discreet in terms of the things that you want to bring across, or if you want to bring all the content, for example, you can do that as well, but just do it quite sort of purposefully and aware of just how easy it is to bring material across. The same will go for rubrics, for assessments. You can bring those across as well in the same way. So I'm going to hit continue at this point, and you can hit finish. Don't worry about offset dates. We don't touch those. Hit finish. This process usually takes about 15 seconds or so. And then once it's finished, we'll get a tick here. And if it's content that you've been moving across, it will appear at the bottom of your content area. Right, so that's done. We hit content, scroll to the bottom, and there it is, the folder that it sat within and the one page that I brought across. Right, so it's quite easy in Brightspace to move things around between sites. Just know that start in the destination and then select the components that you want to bring across. That's it. Di?
Yes, I just want to add a couple of caveats around this process. One, if you have Panopto sitting in one of the content pages that you are copying across, you need to actually tick the external learning tool links and then select that Panopto video as well, so it brings across the LTI link. Otherwise, the Panopto video you'll find when you open it up will say page not found. So you'll either have to reinsert the Panopto video manually, or if you can imagine, if you've got 30 Panoptos, so really important that you actually tick the external learning tool link when you've got Panopto videos in your site. So generally, if you don't have them, that link won't come up. But if you see that link, you should then be sort of selecting it or checking whether the pages that you're copying have Panopto videos in them. So that 1C doesn't have Panoptos in there, so that's why.
So it doesn't appear as an option. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it only appears as an option if you actually have Panoptos in the site. So it's called external learning tool link. And the other thing is when you are copying content, to be really careful, because if you have, the way the system works is the back-end pages are named. And if you have pages that you're bringing in that actually have the same name as a page that you've got already in the site, it will override and link those two pages up, which can cause a lot of issues. So if you not really confident in this space, I would suggest getting support before you actually, because we don't actually have any instructions on this process because of these little issues at this point in time. So we're looking at how we create some instructions for you, but just be really careful. If it's assignments and, rubrics and all of that, this process is really easy, but content can create some issues for you. So just be really careful when copying content from site to site.
Good point. All right. So as Di's pointed out, you want to be confident in the space, but also if you need support and you're not sure about, again, whether there's duplicates happening in the space, you may want to log a service request to get assistance with it. All right. Moving right along. We're going to talk a little bit about the Zoom tool. All right, for those of you setting up your tutorials and you're using Zoom for online tutorials, we find the tool underneath communication and online meeting. Whilst this loads, I'll just remind you that yourself and your teaching team all need to have Zoom accounts for this process to work properly. So what I'm getting at there is if you've got staff members that you want to be co-hosts, etc., for your Zoom meetings, and they haven't taught via Zoom at CSU before, they're going to need to have signed in to Zoom at least once to create that account. And the way that will happen is by just sending them to the Zoom portal at charlessturt.zoom.us and click sign in. That's it. Just by clicking that, signing in with their CSU credentials, it will create the Zoom account for them if they don't have one already. For a lot of us, we don't really think about this because we've been using it for years, etc. here, and we just have the account. But every session we get people logging jobs saying, why can't my new teacher access Zoom meetings, or things are going wrong with the Zoom sessions? And it's because they haven't signed in to create a CSU Zoom account at the beginning of the session, basically. They only need to do it once, and then they'll have that account. Let's assume that they're in there though, and they do have that account. If we go back to, wow, which window was I in? This'll do. Let's go to my training site from here. All right, so we'll open up the online meeting. Now, your Zoom sessions, a couple of things to know about them. When you do create them in Brightspace, they will also appear in the subject calendar for students to be able to see, with a link for them as well. So at this point, we usually find that someone has gone in and clicked on schedule a new meeting. Make sure you give it a name that is concise and with enough detail for students to know what it's for. So whether that's the actual subject code, the purpose of the meeting, and if there is anything specific about what students are meant to be, which students are meant to be coming to this, put it in the title, because it's about the only piece of information they're going to get from this tool around that. So if this was for distance students, you might put that in there as well. Then you set up your date for it. So I'm going to say from next Monday night at 6 o'clock. Don't worry too much about the duration. Zoom doesn't enforce that, for example. Then it'll pick the time zone that you're in on your device currently. It defaults to that. I'm going to make a recurring meeting at this point that I want to occur weekly. Notice that as soon as I checked weekly, it's ticked the Tuesday box here straight away. And that's because Zoom will automatically pick up on the day that you're creating the meeting, not necessarily the day that you want it to be. So even though I set up here Monday, it said, yeah, weekly Tuesday. Well, it's not much good to me. So in fact, I want Monday, and then I can get rid of that. So just check that. It's a little kind of hiccup that Zoom does for some reason, because it picks up on the day that you create it, not the day you want it for. All right, so I'm going to repeat it every week on a Monday, and then I get to choose whether I want to end it after a particular number of occurrences or after a particular date. At this point, it's much of a muchness which option you go for here, but normally, because we know that the teaching term generally goes for either 14 weeks or thereabouts, I'm going to choose 14. And then scrolling down, by default, we only have the waiting room security feature turned on for our Zoom accounts, which means if students are signed into Zoom, going through the Zoom portal, etc., when they join, they'll pass straight into the meeting. And everybody else who's just joining it without signing in will come in as a guest, and they'll be held in the waiting room until you admit them. So if you've been in a Zoom room and it says Alex is waiting in the lobby, I have to admit him. Maybe that's something you want to do, maybe it's not. But if you don't want to use the waiting room, you'll need to toggle that feature off. But it is on by default at CSU as our single sort of Zoom security feature. Some people want even more security, they'll turn on passwords. I would advise against using the authenticated users option down the bottom here, because it'll mean that your students and other people, unless they're signed in to Charles Sturt Zoom accounts, won't be joining the meeting. So just be aware if you're starting to toggle on all the security features, the impact that will have. All right, I have video settings off by default, which means that people can opt in and turn them on if they want to. I allow students to join before me to come into the meeting. But what will happen if a student joins a Zoom meeting and there's no host is after 15 minutes, Zoom will kick them out. It won't hold the connection if there's no host in the room. Right, so it'll let them join, but then they'll be booted out at that point. Again, as I said, opt in for audio, so I mute them on entry, so I'm not getting the cat going off or the lawnmower or whatever. The last option I'll draw your attention to from the meeting options here is the record the meeting automatically. Sounds like a nice idea, but the problem is if you have this turned on and you have enabled to join before the host, it means the students are being recorded without their consent. that's a problem. So it's pretty much at that point one or the other. If you have enable to join before the host toggled off, it means that you'll be in there first, and when the students come in, you can inform them that they're being recorded. But you can't have both of those things on at the same time, really. It's going to create problems for you. So it's one or the other. And then down the bottom underneath advanced options is where you're able to specify your alternative hosts or your co-hosts, as Zoom calls them. And this will only work if they have a CSU Zoom account. So that scenario I talked about at the beginning, if they're not signed in, this is not going to work. You're not going to be able to add them as a co-host. So if I was going to add Di in here, whoops, that's definitely not a correct account. Deep. Wow, I've got, what do they call it? Fat fingers this morning. All right, let's do that. Hit save. If there's no problem with it, this process will go through. I'll get a successful confirmation appear, and it will bring me into this summary of the meeting settings. And at the top of that, you'll notice that it also will give you your calendar items, ICS files and things if you wanted to add it or send this to other people. That way you could give them the calendar item from here. But right at the top in the Zoom tool, you'll notice that it has these breadcrumbs or links that will take you back to your base screen. So for example, if I hit course meetings, it brings me back to my full list of meetings. Remember, we called it that subject, weekly online meeting for distance students, and it's now appeared in the calendar. And you're able to then either start meetings, or as the host, you can also delete them. So normally people will ask me, what about this, the mid-session break, for example? We're not going to have Zoom meetings at that point in week 8. So if you've got the dates for that and you go, right, well, this one I don't need, you can go in and delete that, and it will ask you, delete just this one or delete all of them. So that's why I created 14 at once, and now I can go back through and cherry pick the weeks where I don't want to have Zoom meetings. I'm going to get rid of this occurrence. And my Zoom sessions are now ready to roll for the session. And I have put the link in the Padlet to the Zoom refresher that we ran last week. If you're after more information on new features in Zoom, you're welcome to watch that as well. The last thing that you're probably aware of is that any recordings you make, if you've set your meetings up this way, your cloud recordings will appear in this tab for students. And by default, they are published and visible to students. So that means that they can go in, open this up, and they'll get a tile with either the video, the audio to download, or the chat itself. They can get a copy of each of those things. But the other thing to be across is that sometimes we have recordings that we don't want students to have. So at that point, you use this Publish All Recordings tab, which is toggled on by default, which will just mean every recording you make is visible. You can toggle it off and then decide for each individual recording, do you want them to have it or not to have it? So you do have that level of control over your individual Zoom recording. So if you decide there's a problem with it, they can't have it, or it needs changing or deleting or whatever, you can toggle them individually as well. So that's the online meeting tool for Zoom. And as I mentioned before, simply because you've added them into your upcoming meetings, they will now appear in the student calendar. Let me collapse this. Have a look in the calendar under upcoming. And we'll see that the online tutorials have been added here for students into their subject calendar, along with the link to join the Zoom meeting. So it's quite a clean, useful sort of integration, and also gives the students that information from their subject homepage. All right, I'll stop there for a second. Di, have I got things going on?
Yes, you just have a question about, can you rename the recording so once they've been done?
So the answer is no, you can't do that inside the Zoom tool. It won't let you actually edit the name of the recording there. However, so I don't want to kind of branch off too far, but if you are familiar with the back end of Zoom, the Zoom portal, if you signed into your Zoom portal and found your recordings against your name down here, recordings and transcripts, you can actually go in and find your recordings in there and then edit the recordings, including the title from this point. And that will flow backwards into your subject site and change the title there. So the answer is you can't do it inside Brightspace. You can do it in the Zoom portal and it will flow back and be updated that way. Is it foolproof? Yeah, I mean, I've never seen it not work, if that's what you mean. So yeah, don't delete them. That's probably the thing to look out for. Oh, the other thing I guess to look out for those of you that are looking to edit your recordings in Zoom, and I do talk about that in that Zoom refresher, if you crop your recordings or make changes to them through the Zoom portal, that means opening the recording up, for example, and using the little scissors to crop it. That change will also flow through automatically into the subject site. So here's my tutorial. I've decided actually I need to, don't want to listen to that guy, hit the scissors and trim. And if I said, right, there's a bit at the beginning that was me talking at nobody for the first 10 minutes and at the end where I fell asleep, whatever, you can do your update, trim it, and then that will flow through automatically into the subject site. So you can do your editing in Zoom and it will automatically be updated inside the subject site itself. All right, let's stop there. Oh, that's me talking. Stop that guy. All right, so let's move on. I'm going to talk very briefly about discussion forums. That's what I want to do. All right, let's find an actual subject site. This will do. All right. I'm a student at the moment. I better hop out of the student view. Inside your communication area, you've got your discussion area. And what you'll see is that every subject site seems to have a different approach to discussion forums. So I'm going to give some suggestions, but again, this is completely up to you. Understanding that in Brightspace, there are 3 tiers to setting up the discussion tool. A forum, which essentially is the top level folder that contains a whole series of topics. And we can see the word topic underneath here. And then within those topics, you will have a series of threads or posts, and those posts can have replies. So there's 3 tiers to it: forum, topic, thread. And when you create many forums in Brightspace, what you're actually doing for students is creating a very long scroll as a result of not having kind of a deliberate approach to how your forums are going to be set up. So it's worth thinking about and doing this quite deliberately, and given enough time, preparing these in your master site is a really good idea, right? The master site will allow you to have your forum and your topics in place. Doesn't carry any student posts, etc. across from one to the other. It keeps that structure in place. But really what we suggest in this space, if you're looking for ideas on how to set up your discussion forums so they work concisely for students, is to probably only have about 3 forums and to organize things at the topic level. Have as many as you like at the topic level, but only have a couple of forums, right? So if it was me, I would probably be looking at something along the lines of having a forum called assessment, because that's generally an area that people are interested in, and a main subject forum, an assessment forum, and maybe a support forum with other information. If you have topic-based discussion items that you want students to engage in, there's no reason you can't organise that inside the topics inside your main forum. If you've got different discussion items for each of the assessment tasks, there's no reason you can't organise those inside your one overarching assessment forum. So I'm not going to harp on about it really, but it's worth thinking about, because if you just simply create new forum, new forum, new forum, you're creating a very long scrolling experience for students in the discussion area. They're just not going to engage with it. And then you'll be asking, why don't my students get involved in the discussion forum? That's not the only reason, but it's a contributing factor. All right, the other thing that people often ask in this space is, what about accessible discussions? If you create an assessment task for a discussion for students, you probably are aware that that happens at the topic level, not at the forum level. So you can't make an accessible forum, you make an accessible discussion topic. So if I was going to create one in here, for example, I might say, inside this forum, create a new topic. And at that point, I have the option of adding in a grade, and it's instantly trying to create a column in the grade book for this task. And I would be titling it there. But by default, your discussion items aren't worth any grade, and they don't create columns. But if you want to start creating accessible discussion topics for students to post in, this is where you would start. There are some other considerations in that space, whether it's a group activity, the visibility of the task, for example, whether you want students to see other student posts, whether or not you actually want a setting like students to make multiple posts and for you to be able to put a score against each of them. So if I said, in fact, that this discussion task was going to be worth 10%, and I said that in fact there were going to be 5 posts happening in here, each worth 2%, you'll notice that because I've put in a grade here, I now have the option underneath my evaluation and feedback settings here to evaluate the individual posts, which means I get to put a mark in against each of the student entries. So that's how I would end up giving a score out of 2 for each of those. So it is possible. We don't have a lot of people using accessible discussion forums. There are some, but it is worth knowing that you don't simply just have to give one bulk mark and then figure out somehow how you're going to do that manually. You can split them up using this option. All right, let's move along. We talked about online meetings, gradebook community. Let's talk about announcements. Okay. I have some good examples here of topics and subjects where the academic has in fact made initial announcements to students. Let me find one. Here we go. Midwifery. That'll do. All right. So from the home page, if I open up the announcement tab, we'll find that the announcements appear initially to students inside this widget, which is quite a narrow piece of real estate. It's quite compressed, and you might be worried that this doesn't look amazing for students. The good news is it doesn't just go to them here, it goes through to their emails as well. They get a notification as soon as you publish your announcements that comes through to them as an email. So this isn't going to be the only view that they get, and sometimes people worry that this doesn't look great. This academic, for example, has put images and text inside the post to students, and if the students were to click on the title of the announcement, it opens it in its own full page view anyway. So that kind of widget view on the front page is not the only view that students get of their announcements. It is, I guess, available in multiple locations. It is worth noting when you make your announcements, you can do it from a couple of different spots. One of them is by hitting the drop-down arrow next to announcements and making a new announcement. You can do it from there and it launches that new announcement screen. Same as the online meeting advice, really. Make sure your announcements, if they're meant for a specific group of students, it's probably not a bad idea to identify that within the announcement title. But we do have a mechanism inside this tool to restrict who can see this announcement. And that happens underneath. We go past our availability settings, and down here underneath release conditions, we get to decide who is going to get this announcement. So I'm going to, in fact, create a new condition for this announcement. And the type of a condition that we're looking for here is I want it to look at the class list, who's enrolled, and I want to see section enrollment, which cohorts of students are enrolled. And now I get to pick who gets it. So if you have a subject with distance students, internal students, Sydney students, Albury students, you can actually choose who's going to receive this announcement from this list. and it will only send that announcement to that particular group of students, right? So it can be quite targeted. Your announcements can be audio. If you want to turn your headset on, for example, it'll start picking up what's happening in your headset. If you wanted to let them hear your voice, if you wanted them to see your face, you can turn on video and it'll use your webcam, for example, and there I am, hello. And those things can be attached and they will be sent through as attachments with the announcement. So in Brightspace, they can play it on the spot. If it's an email, it'll be a file attachment that they can click on and play it as well. So it's quite multimodal in that sense. It does allow you to do that. And that's above and beyond what you decide to do in your body area. If you're putting text in, you may want to link the students to part of the subject. It might be content, it might be assessment that you're talking about. But if you want to do that, the announcement tool also has the quick link tool, which is up here in the nav bar. And that will allow you to connect the students on the spot to a particular part of the subject. So if you want to point them to a particular assessment portal, I can say, yep, I want the students to be taken if they click on that link directly to here, and then it creates that link directly within the announcement. If you wanted to take them to content or to part of the discussion forum to make a post, any part of the subject can be quick linked to in the announcements. So it's quite handy in that sense. They're going to get an email. They're going to be prompted. You're going to give them exactly the right place to go to as part of that announcement if you want. The last part about announcements that I'll talk about is that you can send it straight away or you can schedule it in advance. So if you're proactive enough that you're organising your announcements for the whole session, 12 weeks in advance or 14 weeks in advance, you can set the dates for all of those announcements to be released at the given time that you want. That's possible as well. So that's the announcement tool in Brightspace. It's pretty clean. I'm not going to send this out, otherwise Nicole will kill me. The other thing to keep in mind on your homepage and your subject site is that you also have a tool down the bottom here called Activity Feed. The difference between the activity feeds and the announcement area is the activity feed posts will be pinned to the homepage for students to see. Each time they look at an announcement that you send out, it basically gets pushed further and further down the page. And in the widget view that we were looking at a second ago, if it's quite a long announcement, they may never get to the bottom to see the thing that you said was critically important that they access on the homepage for the whole session. So if you want something like that available to students, it could be text, it could be a file, it could be video, audio. Try using the activity feed, make a post on there, and again, it will allow file attachments. It'll also allow you to use a range of quick linking or the video and audio tools, etc. in there as well. And it will pin that to the homepage for students to always have on hand, immediately visible. All right, I'll stop there. Tegan, you've got a question for me?
Yeah, I just wanted to see now that the content has been released, is it a good time to send out your first introductory email? Is it generally the start of this week that goes out?
Look, I mean, everyone's a little bit different in that space, but most people that I work with see this window of time between now and the starter session as when they're sending those announcements out. Week 2 is pretty popular. I did know an academic who liked to send them out at week 4, which kind of freaked the students out a little bit because they couldn't see the subject, but they were getting messages from beyond, you know, sort of, congratulations on joining my subject. What subject? You know, etc. So week 2 is the earliest that I would be doing it, but I think it's a good time to start doing it, definitely.
Okay, I've drafted it, but I wasn't quite sure when's appropriate, but now that it's been released, I think it's probably right.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's usually, there is a subject, I'm not going to show it to you now because of time, obviously, but the academic actually had hidden all of the topics except the first one. And what they wanted students to be doing is basically direct them to the first one and say, once you've finished looking at that, it would then reveal the second topic and then the third topic and then the fourth topic. So they're kind of gatekeeping it based on student engagement, which I can understand, but it also kind of is a little bit contra to some of our accessibility principles around giving people access to everything in the site based on their needs as opposed to when we want them to be looking at it. So that it's a bit of a juggling act in that respect. Trina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly, while we've got this page open, we're back where you were with the staff contacts.
Yep.
How it says interests and hobbies. I'm guessing that's a known thing.
It's a bug. Yeah, it's been reported to Brightspace saying actually in the profile tool it says consultation hours or instructions, and somehow it's coming up as interests and hobbies. Yeah.
Yep. So
Yeah,
I have added interests and hobbies there just so it aligns, but I guess that it was a known thing, but it just looks a bit odd.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, my interests and hobbies include meeting up with you at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Yeah. Yeah, it has been reported back to the vendor, so I would assume that it's going to get fixed relatively soon, but it's certainly been reported back. Thank you for that.
Excellent. Thanks.
All right, look, I am aware that we are at time. It always happens with this session because there are so many things we can talk about. I'm happy to hang around for a bit if people have specific questions, etc. they want to ask any of us. I'll say a big thank you to Di and to Alex for joining me and fielding the chat at the same time. The recording will be made available to you, and we hope to see you at another Teaching Academy PD session. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. We'll stop the recording there. All right.